Welcome back, venturers. It's time for another discussion about VNs. I am Emar, and I'm joined by my glorious co-host Tauros to walk you through a new topic for the day. We've seen them, we use them, and sometimes there is no progressing without them. It's VN guys and walkthroughs time, so Tauros, guide us.
Yes, I do want to say though, not everyone has read them. There are certainly visual novels out there that are kinetic and have no choices involved. And so, to anyone who's only read those kinds of titles, like Ameno Marginal, this may not be an episode very familiar to you.
True.
You could argue Umineko as well, only having one choice at the end. It's mostly a linear story, but that's not the point of this episode here today. We'll be going into the wide world of visual novels and the choices, the branching paths that they may contain within. And so, as a general overview of things, there are all sorts of choices that can be possible while reading a visual novel. Some of them affect the story in very simple ways, like the basic is a choice being offered to the reader. Do you want to eat a peanut butter jelly sandwich, or do you want to eat a bagel? And you pick one, and the scene will change a little depending on which choice you make of which breakfast you may have. And then the plot goes along as usual, where your choice really didn't affect anything. It's the illusion of involvement within a title. That is multiple choices at its most simplistic. But then you start getting into the difficult stuff. You start getting into branching paths where one choice can set you on an entirely different plot than the other choice. You start getting into relationship points where taking certain choices increases favorability with certain characters, and later in the VN there might be automatic behind-the-scenes switches that will filter you on one path or the other depending on how much that character likes you. Like you'll see this in romance or harem, or maybe not harem, but moege VNs that automatically place you onto a specific girl's route. You might see flags where you need to see certain scenes that, raises the flag as a marker so that when you get later into the story, this condition, this check, is cleared for you, like having a pass to get to another side of the story. There's all sorts of little levers that can be pulled in the background, some of which may even be global, as in once you get a certain ending, that unlocks the option for a choice to show up at the beginning of the VN, and now you're able to take that choice and you're able to explore a path that was previously boarded up and inaccessible at first. So when you have all the difficulties and the complexities and the under the hood, calculations going on in this program, that will naturally lead to people wanting to crack it. And that's how we get into our whole field of walkthroughs, guides, and best route orders. So
and sometimes
go ahead.
and sometimes developers of such VNs are very sneaky with flags. Right, because you mentioned now all kinds of levers that can be switched on and off, or maybe incremented in value. But think about it. Most commonly, those flags are raised and or lowered and or turned on off, depending on the most basic idea of a choice presented to a player. But that not necessarily has to be the case. One such example also you brought, how there is a global flag for something to permanently open. But I've also experienced the permanently closed, so the opposite.
Oh, wow. Permanently locked content. Is that true?
Yeah. Yes, there is. It was in, Newton and the apple tree. Okay? So you had, this is a ladder structure VM, in which you had an ending. Once you read it, you no longer can reach that ending ever again.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah, it's interesting because from the perspective of a completionist, right? You can't experience everything. It's just so that there's an ending you can only experience once.
Wow, that is novel. So, like, it's like you mentioned, where there's a certain choice you can make to go down that route, and then once you reach the ending and you try to start a new game, that choice is no longer possible?
The choice is possible, but it leads to a different outcome.
Wow, it rewrites it.
Yes.
Whoa.
And it makes sense in that title, but the first time I was like, wait, that didn't happen last time. So it's funny that this was I think it was even noted in a guide that the first time you get an ending A, and every subsequent time you get an ending A plus.
A plus. Interesting. Novel.
Right, like, So the developer is very sneaky. Another example, and I'll start with some oddities, right? To mention the flags being made with choices. But there's an example, X-Blaze, that has no choices and has multiple endings. How is that possible? And the game tracks how much trivia and glossary have you read. So whether or not an article, because you have an access to a glossary of terms and a wiki of terminologies, and the more you read those articles, and the more you clear them by reading those, that guides your flags, and that makes the choices, I guess you could say.
That's a very unique way to have a choice.
Right? Exactly. So there are very sneaky ways that the VN developers try to outwit or maybe hide flags from play.
Earlier you mentioned you're looking up your guide to Newton and the Apple Tree. And I wanted to talk about guides too, because I have a soft spot for the old retro kinds of visual novel guides. They would list out a flowchart of all of the choices and how the decisions you make would branch out and the effects it would have. It would be like, hey, here's this question that the character asks you, and there'd be two arrows sticking out of that node, like one for yes and one for no, and then saying yes would be like the +1 relationship point, and the no would be just blank, and it'd continue on to the next node, and you'd follow the arrows. And every time, and then you'd get to like a checkpoint where it's like, is this flag cleared? And if so, and then it keeps you along the route, and it's like, if not, it kicks you to this dead end. I loved those old flowcharts. You could see some of them scrolling in the background of the YouTube like image gallery. Those were always so comforting in their own way, of seeing this story, of seeing the visuals, the audio, the characters, the voice acting in a great like multimedia presence and an experience. And then you can bust open this flowchart, and it was like looking under the hood of a car. You could see all the belts, all the gears whirring underneath the surface and how they interacted.
That kind of guide is a representation of the uniqueness of VNs. You see all the choices that are presented and all the transitions and or effects they have later on the story. And they were a treat to see. Sadly, we live in the worst timeline that the majority of guides right now are made with the optimization in mind. Meaning, currently, the most common type of guides is like, save here, pick this.
Now
it's the most optimized type of guides that are listing a list of possible endings to achieve, and then optimal amount of save states to create and load at opportune times.
True, but I don't really mind that. It's nowadays, well, you see a lot of guides that are simply bullet points and text. Like step 1, answer yes to this question, and then step 2, answer I would never to this question, and it's just a bullet point of responses, and every so often it's make save file space 1 here, and then you go down the more, and then you get, okay, here's the ending, now reload save 1 and do these. There's no magic to that. Now you're just following a to-do checklist.
Exactly, that's what I said. It's optimized for going through from top to bottom and just clearing everything. There is no, how can I say it, player strategy. You're not, because that's what flowchart requires you to do. Okay, this is the flowchart. Okay, I now know everything. Now to plan out the approach.
Mm-hmm. You would start at the end and you would see the checks required and you'd work your way through the map. Like, okay, I gotta clear this, I gotta get this flag, I gotta get these relationship points, I gotta avoid the dead ends from the wrong answers. It was almost like a maze. And that was its own layer of enjoyment. I know I'm talking about the guides and stuff, but I would also love to play those visual novels, I would like to do it blind on the first try. Just picking whatever, getting dead ends, getting certain endings or whatever, and then exploring a bit more depending on the visual novel complexity or length. And eventually, then I would follow a guide and try to find one of these flowcharts, and it would be its own different brand of fun to track out the proper steps I need to take to get to the end.
I 100% agree, and I feel like my enjoyment of discovering VN's secrets can be traced back to how far can I postpone looking up a guide. The longer I can manage uncovering new things without a guide, the more enjoyment I have. And it's exactly that. How much more I can find those dead ends, or maybe new routes, or maybe something opens up, and I'm like, yes, that's it. Until I reach a dead end, and okay, fine, I give up. Spoil me, and then I'm like, oh, I chose this one. Okay.
Now, to a certain degree, it's all fun and games until, like you mentioned, there are some titles that make it far too difficult for you to figure out how to get those certain scenes and how to get out. And you have to, throw in the towel, like you mentioned, too early.
Yes, and probably I need to mention the title I mentioned a couple of times before.
Yeah.
The Hello Lady, in which you had all options in choices available from the start, yet 2 out of 4 characters are locked in a forced route order, meaning out of number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, 3 and 4 were locked behind you experiencing the ending 1 and ending 2. Even though options that normally start you on 3 or options that start you on 4 are available from the start.
Yeah, I never like that. Like, if it's going to be an enforced route order, then keep those, choices locked. Not so much locked, but just hide them completely. Don't even show them. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then once you clear the requirements, then you could either introduce them as additional options or bring up a new scene that, has that choice to start those new routes. I really hate it when, like, you can start going on a route and then, it's locked because you have other characters to do or whatever, and it just bad ends you early.
And I was so unfortunate that I started with the most locked character first. I reached at the end and I'm like, okay, I tried to load the previous stage, change these choices a little bit, couldn't go there anywhere. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Okay, maybe I'm not supposed to go for the big boss immediately. Fine. Let's go for number 3. And guess what? Freaking happened. The same. I'm like, ugh. God damn it. That was unfortunate that half the characters were locked, and those are the characters I deemed more interesting and I started with. God damn it.
Poor Amar.
Yeah.
I also have to mention, I.O. That's a pretty old sci-fi visual novel. It had the weirdest route structure I've seen. where like you basically had 4 routes. It branched very early. Very early you got to decide who your main character was, and then it would go off into 4 different stories with, each of those characters as protagonist of their own events.
Okay.
And they each had choices in them. And they each had they had a lot of choices that would affect different scenes. And then when you finish all of them, it would unlock, like, you could say a Route E, which is like the culmination of everything. Okay?
Okay.
Once you finished Route E, then things got weird, and there was like bonus prime routes that sort of corresponded to the 4, but kind of. And then the choices you made in various routes and aspects would then affect being able to unlock scenes and other routes, and you needed to get the 100% completion for other elements. And it got confusing really fast. Like in IO, there were like 3 different ways to start a new game.
Ah.
Like, it got confusing pretty fast. This was something that
That's-
even with a guide might be utterly
Oh god.
incomprehensible, and you might easily softlock yourself. Well, not softlock. You might easily get some value set to true instead of false, and now you have no clue why your guide isn't working.
Oh god. Ooh, that sounds so wacky.
We've been talking a lot about plot-focused VNs and the ones that are focused on the story. But like you mentioned with Hello Lady, some of these, walkthroughs and guides start breaking down when you consider, a typical moege sort of story, where the choices involved are basically which heroine's character route you want to get on. But that does introduce another aspect of route order. Sometimes it's important to figure out whose route you want to do first because of the plot relevance and the importance, and some are better layered than others. Other times, route order is simply, whoever's best girl, right?
Route order. I think for the longest time, I never ever cared about that. I feel like that concept surfaced to my mind around the time I met you, Taurus. Before that, like what order schmorder? I don't care. I play it my way, okay? If the game allows it, I will play it my way. There are some exceptions. For example, I do believe Fate Stay Night historically was the title that had an enforced route order, but during the re-editions they took it away. So on those cases, I still respect route orders because that was how it was intended. For the character's route order or recommended route order, I never care.
Yeah, because I think in like the Real to Nua updates or whatever, each route was like its own exe file or program or something. Okay. So yeah, to do Fate route, you would like double click fate.exe. Unlimited Blade Works was
what?
UNB.
Weird.
I think so. I'm not too certain because I didn't do it myself, but I believe that's why they're technically not enforced anymore. Even though, like you said, they're kind of supposed to be enforced.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, it's true. It still holds up.
Yeah, my opinion on the route order is I don't care. I never looked that up. Never ever, never has been. I just do it my way. And if I spoil myself by going into more plot relevant character first, so be it.
No way. I am the opposite. Sure, the first time I play a VN, I'll go out into whatever, route I like, or whoever seems to be best girl or whatever.
Okay.
But then I'll look up a guide because I want to know if there's a suggested route order involved. And if there is, either because of quality or best paced out enjoyment or plot reasons, I will definitely follow it. Like, for example, Magikoi. Magikoi is generally, just whoever's route you want to experience, because it focuses mostly on the heroines. But there is a true route at the end, and obviously that needs to be kept for last. But for pacing reasons and for certain foreshadowing reasons, I do think there is a better way to do it. Like, I do think Miyako's route first is the most obvious because she's the one who's crushing the hardest on the main character for the entire common route. I do think you also want to do, I think if I'm remembering right, you want to do, it's one route before Yume's route, because then it foreshadows. Never mind. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Already,
but yes.
I hear. I'm like, nope, I'm not doing that ever.
No,
Although
because you will
I'll give
ruin
you
your
one.
enjoyment. Some scenes won't
Who
hit
cares?
as hard.
Screw it.
How
Screw
could you
it.
be so heartless?
Screw it then. If Best Girl is ruined by route order, so be it.
It's not ruined.
Although-
It's just you could get even more peak if you do it a certain order.
No, don't care. Nope. Although I'll give you one credit. I'll agree with you that true route most often is left for the last. I agree with that.
I think it was Never 7 where you had something that most resembled the true route. And then after that, you had another route, which was got pretty much treated as a joke route.
Okay. So it's not a true route.
I mean, it was, but then I guess you could say you had the comic relief ending route, where it kind of put the entire premise of Never 7, flipped it onto its head, and they kind of made it a prank on another character for an entire week. Personally, I didn't like it because I felt it went too far in mocking the premise of Never 7 in the first place. But I mean, that was a rare case where it didn't end with the true route. It kind of went off until Omake Land. Generally, though, I agree. Of course, you want to save the best for last. You want to leave the lasting impression into your reader as your best and hardest hitting, most emotional route, of course, right?
Yeah, because they true routes are often created as a send-off, like happily ever after everything has been solved kind of deal. And happily ever after, I more refer to a drama or a conflict that is not necessarily character relationship, because all the endings often end with happy endings, right?
Now, what happens if
Although,
okay, yeah.
there are certain exceptions, like I mentioned multiple times before. I do believe it was an episode Michael SK. I think so. When we discussed endings. And I said some titles put true ends first. And this is most often evident in serialized VNs. And the biggest example I always give is Runs 7, often called Sengoku Runs. This allows you any other ending than true before you reach true ending. Because that's the only ending you really need to experience for the stories in a series make sense. And then you can go on and experience different routes that boil down into what ifs. They won't be followed up with the next title in the series. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because if you need a continuation across multiple volumes, then you need to have a definitive canon ending on canon route, so to speak, before you can continue on. And Grisaya was second that I know of that had the same deal. You had a first title that had multiple endings, but on the sequel you need to follow a singular ending to continue on from, right?
Very interesting. I have a question for you, MR.
Okay.
In some titles where there isn't a true end, it's, for example, a moege, where you have your available heroines for all their character routes. Which one do you do last? Do you save like the best for last, who you think like best heroine is going to be, and you purposely put it off later? Or
I feel like
or are you one of those who like you only do the characters you're interested in, and then you just stop reading the VN?
listen, I pretty much always complete all the VNs. I rarely abandon after like, oh, that was my favorite character, bye.
Yeah,
No,
same
that's
here.
not how I do.
Agreed.
Yeah, I complete them. But I feel like when it comes to question who you go first for, I felt like we had that conversation many times before, and I'm going to be as flaky as ever. I don't know. I never pick. I don't guide myself as, oh, she seems like the best girl, let's go for the first and or last. I have no pattern in that.
You are unrestrained, unburdened.
Yeah. Sometimes I go for the best girl, or at least whoever I perceive to be the best girl based upon common route first, sometimes last. It varies.
Mm-hmm. So you are free from criticism because you don't even know what you're going to do.
Exactly. Even I'm unpredictable to myself. Yeah, exactly.
As for me, I don't think I've really realized this until lately, where I've given it some thought, but I think I tend, for my first route, to go to the main heroine. You know, the person who was, the heroine who was most tied to the main character. I guess you could say that, the cover girl of the title.
Poster girl, yeah.
Poster girl, yeah. Because usually that feels like it's the most right, thematically, as far as the plot goes. This is the heroine who was designed, from the ground up for the VN. The developers wanted.
The default option.
Sure, if you want to be cruel about it. Wow. Because that's how I feel the story is going. Uh-huh. And then once you get that out of the way, then it can be like, now you can explore a visual novel to your heart's content. You could see all these other characters. You can see how those turn out. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I see that. Okay, I see that.
I always like to mention, Wonko from Majikoi as a character who I didn't have any special feelings for. She was cool and all. I got onto her route, and her route was fantastic. I loved the plot. I loved the characterization. I loved, the writing and the plot developments. And oh my goodness, my heart went out to her. And she wound up being like best girl of the VN. And nice. I remembered how you mentioned how, you don't ever want to quit a VN because, you got best girl and that was it. And, this is a big reason why. I have no idea how these routes are going to turn out. I have no idea how much I'm going to like or maybe even dislike certain heroines by the time I get to the end. And, and I owe the developers that much involvement,
True. Although, tell me, what was your biggest dissonance when it comes to, I like this character, but I hate her route?
Well, I mean, we'll keep it focused on Majikoi because the easiest answer is Chris's route. Back in the day, I love how Chris's route was infamous, even outside of Majikoi fans. It was one of those just general truths you were aware of if you were involved in visual novels at all. Like knowing that Ever 17 had some crazy-ass plot twists at the end.
Okay.
It was also knowing that Chris's route was truly garbage. I liked Chris as a character. I liked her whole justice and moral, upright, personality. I really liked how the romance between her and the MC developed. There were so many good scenes, and then the plot was just so truly god-awful.
My God.
Poor Chris. She got done so dirty because of the plot going so stupid and have no clue what it was doing and getting into some really stupid scenes. She did not deserve it.
Now that I think about it, I'm trying really hard although maybe I don't play that much VNs with character endings, to have that many titles to pull from, probably the one I've read recently would be Venus Blood. It had a character arcs, and probably the character arc tied to a character I really like that was complete garbo was for the Harpy Merchant in that title. There was a Harpy Merchant that was very early on added to your faction, and she helped manage all the trade routes and commercial districts, and her whole arc was complete trash. Oh my god.
No.
But she was so cool, so single focus on making money to the utmost fault because of how airheadedness was portrayed. I mean, she was Harpy, so makes sense, beard brain, right? Man, that was such a bundle of joy to read, and her arc was just like, please, no more.
Oh, that always sucks.
Although I have an opposite example. I think probably my favorite route of a character I'm not the biggest fan of is class representative from Mavlov.
Oh, yeah.
From Mavlov Extra. I wasn't a fan of that character. Chizuri, I think, Chizuko, something like that. And her route was actually really amazing. I really liked her route in that game.
That's why I always think that you should give all the characters some love, no matter, how minor they may be or how much of a side character they are. You never realize, when the developers are gonna come out swinging with some incredible backstory or character depth to make you cry. It was like, whoa. Chizuri, that's it.
Chizuri, yeah. And she gained a lot in my eyes from that route. I'm like, wow, wait a second. You're not as garbo as I thought you were.
Oh my god. How could you, MR?
Okay, that was too cruel, but
You're terrible.
Maybe not so extreme, but I wasn't fan of her.
Okay.
After that route, I was like, okay, I'm warming up to you. Okay, I'm unsundering myself, okay, from you.
Well, one last thing I do want to say is a shout out to all the people who create visual novel guides in the first place. They are relied upon by everyone, and yet someone has to be the one to first brave through the VN's mechanics and their calculations and their nonsensical decisions sometimes to figure out what makes this VN tick. And so they got to be the ones to create these guides in the first place. So to everyone who does that.
We salute you, guide creators. Not every hero wear capes. Thank you for hard work.
Yes. And that's a good point to leave off on today's discussions. And hopefully everyone who listened enjoyed it. I'm glad that we're able to share our own thoughts about walkthroughs, guides, and route orders with everyone. And hopefully it was informative or entertaining to yourselves as well.
Yep, we reached the good ending, so thanks to all our listeners, and VNture out.
VNture out.